Hey guys, welcome to Zero Degree Coder. In this video, we are going to learn react-redux. So first question comes in our mind, like what is Redux? Okay, so what is Redux? Anyone who wants to say what is Redux? Okay, that's like if you don't want, then I'm going to tell what is Redux. So basically, what is Redux? Redux is a predictable state container for JavaScript apps. Okay, so what do you mean predict? What like we divide this statement into different chunks. The first, the one of the most understandable chunk is called Redux is for JavaScript apps. Means we can use Redux with all type of JavaScript apps like React, Angular, Next.js, React Native, and so on. The next statement comes, it is a state container. So what do you mean by state container? State container means basically it contains the whole state of your app. Okay. So like all the state of your application will be on the Redux. Okay. The third statement said that it is a predictable state container. So why we call a predictable state container? Because we can modify the state of your app. We can keep track of your. We can keep track the a previous state of the app. Okay, so now the next thing question comes in our mind, like why should we use Redux? Okay, so why should we use Redux? Okay, so there is a call in the normal app, in normal React app. Okay, if suppose that there is a name state or name state in your our React app, and suppose that that name state in our a component or a component, and we want that name state, we want name state should be on the app component. Basically what is figure, so that there is a called app component, and there is some sibling app has sibling components, and they have a child component and so on. So if I have to pass this state to the parent component, so how we gonna deal that? So how we do that? So we just pass a data from one component to another component, and from that component to a next component, and so on. So like we pass from parent component to nested child component, a child component to nested parents component. So it's becomes we call it props drilling, and we should not do a props drilling because it's a bad practice, and it's become hectic to manage the state of your app. So that's why Redux comes. Redux what does do? Okay, so in the next picture, in the picture you can also see without Redux. Okay, without Redux, how it's happening? There's there's a name, there's a name state, and we are passing to the child component, and from that component to the another component, and from that component to another component, and so on. So it's become hectic to manage your state. But with Redux, what does we do? With the Redux, there's a in the degree in definition is say called Redux is managing the application state. It Redux managing the application state and holds a single global object. So what does do Redux? Redux comes in a like Redux has a main logic. What does how the Redux solve this problem? So Redux what does do? Redux has only one single store, a single global object where whole application state will be stored and can be accessible from anywhere. So that's how it's solving this problem. Okay. So how does Redux solving this problem? Redux solve this problem by by creating a one single global object which can be accessible anywhere, and we can change the data. Okay, so that's how Redux comes in the picture and is stored. So from this store, you can see from this store we can read the data from send the data from any component. But with the without Redux, how we are passing this data? You can see that from this component to that component, from that component to this component. So it's become hectic. So how Redux is cool. Okay, so uh, how many tools are there's already some tools which are prevents props really, like React context also help us to prevent props really. Use context plus reducer which also help us to prevent props drilling. And but Redux also help us to prevent props drilling. But Redux is much more popular than the first and second, because Redux is existing till when these two tools are not exist in the market. So that's why Redux has a large community support, and more of the nowadays most of the, and even our build company go with the Redux in the rather than the React context. Okay, so let's summarize what we had learned. So we had learned what is Redux, So what is Redux? Redux is a predictable state container for JavaScript apps. Okay. Why should we use Redux? Because to avoid props drilling, to access the state from any component anywhere. How does Redux solve the problem? How does Redux solve the props drilling issue? Redux solve the problem props drilling issue with the using the global state object or global using the store object or global state object. Okay, so this is a summarization. So, to work with the Redux, there's some library required called Redux code library, and the next library it should be a React Redux. It's the official Redux UI binding library. So Redux, what is Redux is a code library. Okay, but to work with the React, we have to also install the React Redux official UI binding library for the React to call the React state or to read the state. Okay, in the Redux there are three core concepts which should be get master on that. The first one is that one of the most important thing is called store. A store is also called a global object or global state object. Okay, a store that is a whole the state of your application. Basically store has a whole state of your application. Okay, action, what is that action? You learn about like there's a like in Redux we say action, so it's much more like important word. So what does an action do? Action describes the changes in the state of your application. Okay, so an action that describes the change in state of your application. Okay, so action has a just a just a type. An action has a just a object which describes the change in the state of your application. The next thing comes is the called reducer. A reducer which has just which carries out the state transition depending upon the action. Reducer has a logic like how does our store should be changed, so on that. Okay, so let's get our hand dirty and let's make a simple counter app with Redux. Okay, so finally if I say like just make a counter app, okay, to use we use like okay, we want to make a counter app. Okay, like suppose that we are going to create card count. Okay, and set card count. Okay, and we are using use state. Suppose that there should be a card count will be 0. Okay, then like okay, whenever that user pass that like whenever users buy some item, so it will increment the count. Okay, so but what is the like we just increment the count, but we want that this count should be access to the nested child component. So what does we do? We pass a props drilling, but with Redux we don't have to pass a props drilling. What does we do to work with Redux? How we are going to deal with? First of all, we have to create a folder called Redux. Okay, in the Redux folder we have to create another folder according to our logic and according to our use case. I'm going to create a counter app or card counter. So I create a folder called card counter, and every uh, counter has a three file called action types.ts. Another one will be action.ts, and the next one will be a reducer.ts. Okay, this one is like every folder should have, you can see in the like in the boilerplate also, you see these three files should be action type, action, and reducer. Okay, on the Redux we have to create another folder called, we have to create another file called store.ts. Okay, and the next file is called root reducer. Okay, root reducer.ts. Okay, so we have to install a library called Redux library. So we just installed Redux library, and another library which we have want called React Redux. Okay, React Redux library which we want. Okay, so how do you gonna deal with the so if you want to like create a store, what does mean by store? A store has like it's called a global state where we store all the state of our app. So what does we do? Instead of storing the counter state here, we store that state on the our uh, our our Redux store. Okay. So how can we how to create a store? So what does we do? Import create store from Redux. Okay, I import create store from Redux. Okay, now we have to also I write export cons store is equal to create store. Okay, so it will create the store, but there is a need some two things. It's called reducer. Create store takes two argument. One thing is called uh, reducer, another thing is called store enhancer. Okay, so we have to like create a reducer. So first of all, go in the counter app. Okay, I create like a const. Okay, I just create a const increment counter. Increment and counter is equal to in. Okay, increment counter. Okay, so it will have a, like we have to define, like it's not a mandatory to create a action type, but to avoid the minor, what do you say, to avoid the typo error, we define the type here. Okay, the next action type will be called decrement counter. This is the, like, there's a call in Redux, we have a pattern to how to implement Redux. So that's why like we are making like this. Okay, so after like creating the export of counter types, so we have to also export this action type, export const increment counter and export const decrement counter. Okay, now we have to like the logic for the, okay, first of all we have to import that the action type. Okay, what we have to do, we have to import, action types, action types. Okay, and then we have to write, it action creators. Okay, action creator, what is that? Action creator is just a, action creator, what does action creator, action creator has a, just a normal object which has an action type, and if there is a payload, then there should be a payload. So what does action, so action creator has a just text types. Okay, so if I like create a export exposed const increment in increment counter, we just name a call increment counter action. Okay, now it will be an of, it will be a function. Okay, it will be a function which return in an object. Okay, which takes, what does it takes, it takes payload payload, and we have to define a type. Okay, type should be, we have to import like which type, we have to import increment 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 counter from, we have to import increment counter, like we have to import the type, action type. I hope it's not making a lot of sense, until unless like if I did not create a increment counter app. So just hold on with me. I hope it will make sense for you after, like, when I implement this increment counter. Okay, so I will add a type called increment counter, and also pass a payload. Okay, so what does action creator? Action creator is just a normal object, which takes payload and returns a new object. Return a object which takes type and payload. Okay. So on the reducer, what I have to do, I have to also import this files action type dot action types. Okay. So I copy the, I just increment counter and decrement counter, import from the action type. Just hold on guys, like just hold on with me. Okay, now I have to create a call export const counter reducer. Okay, it will also take a arrow function. And what does the counter reducer return? It has a action, it has a, what counter reducer has a floor function which has action and payload. Okay, so after that, what we have to do, we have to add a switch case. Okay, we have to add a switch case. Okay, sorry, my bad. So on the reducer we get a type. Okay, so on the action type we just pass it, like on the reducer we there is a called action, we get the action, and the state will be also there. Okay, state, which will be a state called, so we have to define a const initial state. Okay, and we have to define a count, maybe 0. Instead of they defining the counter will be there, we have to defining from the there, from there, and const state will become init state. So what does a reducer take? Reducer just take reducer takes what? Reducer take just state, another thing called an action. Okay, what does a head reducer? Reducer takes an state, and it takes a action. So from the action I destructured a type and payload, because you can see we are passing that action. Okay, now we have added a switch case if type. Okay, now what does I have to do? Okay, after like adding the switch, my bad, just hold on. Okay, now after like adding the initial state, what does I have to do? Okay, so I have to add a switch case. Okay, so how do we like if my type, okay, the first one type, like if the my from the object, from we dispatch an action, if my type, I will destructure the type. If my type will be increment counter, if there will be count increment counter, then what I have to do, I have to just what I have to do, I have to return. Okay, I have to return what? I have to return, and count is equal to what? uh State dot count, whatever the state will be, like state dot count plus whatever I'm passing is a payload. Okay, and I will return, I will remove this, I don't want to add a break. Okay, this will be a logic, and by default what does I do? I just return on my state. Okay, making sense? So I hope this is not making a lot of sense for you guys, until unless I don't create a counter app. So this is like, hold on with me. So what does I do? Delete. So I created the action types. Okay, and after that what action type is just we just write, why we write action type? To avoid typo error, to avoid typo error. Okay, and what does an action text? Action is just a normal JavaScript object which return an object which takes like type, and if there is requirement of payload, it will also take payload. Okay, now what does a reducer text? Reducer has just a code logic. Code logic. There will be logic on the reducer. So what does like counter reducer? Reducer is a function that takes state and has an action, and reducer has a state and action. So we define a state called initial state, and from the action we get their action. From the action we destructure the type and payload. Okay, then after that we define a type switch case, and if the case is increment counter, then return the state dot count plus payload. Okay, and after that we make a root reducer. So const, okay, I make a const root reducer. Okay, it will take a combined reducer. Okay, I have to import combine. Okay, just hold on, I have to import a combined reducer. Okay, import combine reducer from redux. Okay, and combined reducer, but okay, what does combined reducer takes? It takes an argument. Okay, so first I define, okay, combined reducers, my bad. Okay, after that what I have to do, I have to define a count and variable name. I just define counter state. Okay, and counter reducer. Okay, on the store.ts I just pass my root reduce. Okay, I have to ex, export default root reducer. Okay, on the store, I just read root reducer. Okay, so on. What does we do? I create a folder called Redux. On the Redux folder, we create a card counter folder. We have three files called x and type. X and type has just a normal string, like increment counter to avoid the type error. Okay, to avoid type error, so we have imported like we have defined increment counter. Okay, on the xn, what does we doing? We are importing that increment counter, and there is a called xn creator which has a payload. Okay, and payload means like whatever we are passing the data from the front end. Okay, and we are returning increment counter. We are returning an object which has a like we have what does it, like this function takes a payload, xn takes a payload, and it's returned an object called which has a type and payload. Okay, on the it's go on the reducer. Okay, and it takes the state is equal to initial state. Okay, after that it takes there will be a, like from the it's go on the reducer, and we will destructure the type and payload, and we check if switch type. If case is increment counter, then return count is state.count plus payload. Payload means like whatever we are passing the data. And on the root reducer, we just like import the counter reducer map there. And on the store, what do we do? We have just like import create store from Redux and import root reducer from here. And we have created a store. Now let's go on the front end. And now it's time to wrap. Now it's time to wrap the global store or store with the our app. So what we have to do? We have to import called like first of all, I have to import store. So store looks like okay. I have to import store. So I go on the index.ts, import store. Okay, from dot slash redux slash store. So I imported the store, and there's a call. Okay, my bad. I imported the store, and to uh to pass the store, like to access the store to our app, we have to import a provider called import provider from react redux. So I import provider as okay as redux provider. So I import a provider. Okay, so provider, what does take? So we have to wrap our whole app with the provider. The provider takes an argument as a store. So I pass the store. Provider takes a props called store. So I pass that, and now I wrap my whole app with the provider, with the store, Redux store. So now Redux store has been implemented to our app. Okay. So I hope like this guy's not making a sense. A lot of you guys, I think like when I had learned first time Redux, it's not making any sense for me. Like I was just it's go out of my mind. Okay. So just hold on with me for some 5 minutes more. Now we have to do like we have to like access the store. So in Redux, what we learned like in the beginning, Redux has a one global object or global state. So how do you like we have created a global state. So we have to read the state const Redux state. So we use app select use selector use selector hook, which comes from the React Redux. So I import the use selector hook, import use selector from React Redux. Okay. Oh, my bad. React Redux. So React Redux to talk with the Redux box, we have to use React Redux uh, library, which gives a use selector hooks to read the state. The use selector hooks state takes a callback. Okay, I pass a callback, and it will return any state. Okay, so you can see uh, Redux is if I console my Redux state, so it will be like miracle for you guys really. So if I just console.log and Redux state. Redux state. Okay. So you can see on the Redux state, we have an object. Okay. And inside that, we have a counter state. And in the counter state, we have a count is equal to 0, which we have set here. Okay. So now it's like something making like how it's like magic, like how we get the data this from there, and we are like, getting this data and so on. So guys, you can see on the app.tsx, we read the Redux state. So rather than like putting the state like counter state to on the this app component, we put the whole like state on the Redux store. So we read the store from the Redux using use selector hook, which takes a callback, a called state callback, and return another callback called state. So if I can pass a name like store, so it will return a store. So basically, it will return a store. So you can also see that a called Redux store. So whatever like you want to change, you can go ahead and change that path. So it will like pass, it will give the Redux state. Okay. So now we from the Redux state, if I like cons from the Redux state, I destructure the counter state. Okay. Counter, my bad, counter state, and inside counter state we have a count. So I destructure the count from the counter state. Okay. So it's going to have a type unknown, so I just define a type as any right now. Okay. So now if I just like put uh, count redux redux count is okay a count. Okay. So you can see redux count is 0, but okay, we want to change this state. Okay. So currently we have a state of count is equal to 0, but we want to increment button increment, we want to increment counter. Okay. We have added on click called increment counter. We have make a function called handle const handle increment handle increment counter. Okay, it will be a function. So we have to write a logic, write logic, write logic that change the counter. Okay. So how do you want to go, like how we are going to do that? Okay. So I make a function called handle increment counter. We have to write a logic that which will increment the count. On clicking on this, it will update the redux state, like it will update the counter state. Okay. So how? So we to update the uh to update redux state, we have to invoke an action, like using action we have to call an action, we have to dispatch an action. Okay. So how we are going to dispatch an action? So we have to use another hook called dispatch. Okay. So now I have to import a const dispatch is equal to use dispatch. Okay. So on the React Redux hook, from the React Redux, we import this called use dispatch hook. So I just right now I define a type as any. In future I will define that. Okay. So what do like use dispatch? So what we have to do? We have to dispatch an action which will increment the counter. So what does we do? We have an I already created an action creator called increment counter action. So right now I go on the app.tsx, and what does I do? I call dispatch increment counter action. Okay, and I have to import this one. Okay, I think I just copy this name and I import it here. Import action creator. Import from Redux slash a card counter, uh, slash card counter slash action. So we have this, we have imported a increment counter action. So okay, so increment counter action takes a payload. If you want to increment counter, if you want to increment counter with one, just pass one. Okay, so what does we do? We have added on click on this button which called handle increment counter, and on handle increment counter we are dispatching in dispatching an action creator called all increment counter action. Okay, so what does it takes? Increment counter action takes a payload. Right now it's taking a payload as a number, so I pass a number. It has a type. Okay, so increment counter what does do? It return an object which has a type and payload. Okay, it goes on the reducer. Okay, whenever we dispatch an action, is go on the reducer, and it takes, what does it do? Like export const reducer. Like we define a state. So reducer was the take. What does take? It takes an initial state and action. So from the action we structure the type and payload. Okay, and we are checking if switch case by using switch case. If case is increment counter, basically if type is increment counter. Okay, then what we have to do? We have to do state dot count, which is my 0. Okay, and plus payload. So if I click on increment counter, what does it do? It increment my counter with 1. So this is how we are going to create. We have created a counter increment counter app. Okay, but what will I say? Increment decrement counter. Now create a logic or create a reducer or create a dispatch, whatever, create action creator uh, to decrement the counter. So how you are going to do that? Okay, so first of all, we got going to the front end part. Okay, so for the increment counter, what we have to do, what we had done, we had created first of all action type called increment counter. Okay, and then what we have to do, we have written an action which takes payload and return an object which has a type and payload. Okay, and the reducer which takes a state is equal to which takes initial state and action. Okay, so what does it do? So we had added switch case, and if our case is like, we'll write their logic according to our requirement. We like take this in state is equal to state dot count and add the change of value. If you want to like multiply, we can also multiply. So if I click on 0 to 1, then it will be also always be a 0. Okay, I just like make it 1. Okay, then 1 into 1 become 1. Oh, my bad. So if I make 2, then it will be a change. 2 into 2, 2 to the 2 to the, oh, 2 and the 2. Okay, I have to add something here. So what does it do? So it will, like, you can see, we can change whatever way you want to change. So Redux has a basically logical code. Okay, so Redux has a pattern which we have to follow. So what is the pattern? First we have to define action type, then we have to go on action. Okay, and we have on the reducer we have to write logic, and using the use app selector we read the state. Using the use selector hook we read the state. So I hope guys this making sense for you. Like I had learned Redux in 1 week, man, after like practicing hard work. So like we have to spend time. That's how you like you learn the Redux, because it feels like a magic for the me first time. Okay, so now let's just to make a create a decrement counter. So anyone wants to contribute with me? Like anyone wants to like help me to implement the decrement counter button logic? Okay, so yeah, if not, okay, let's get create a call button called decrement counter. Okay, I created a button called decrement counter, and let's get what does it? Let's create a function called handle decrement counter. Okay, I created a function called handle decrement counter. Okay, now we have to write from the Redux logic, like there should be a counter action. Okay, so okay, I add the on click called decrement counter, handle decrement, my bad, handle decrement counter. Okay, so we have added the handle decrement counter. Okay, so now I want to decrement counter by 1. So anyone wants to participate, go ahead. Okay, so on first of all we go on the action type and we define a export const decrement counter. Okay, so let's just define a decrement, oh my bad, decrement counter. So I define a type called decrement counter, and on the action type we have imported the that count. Okay, now what does we do after defining the type? What we have to do, we have to go on the like we, what is the flow? We define an action type. Okay, to get rid of, to get rid of get rid of typo error, get rid of typo error, that we did not get any typo error. And we have to write action creator, action creator. Okay, we have to write action creator, which takes a payload as an argument if you want to pass, and return, which return an object. Okay, it will return an object. Now we have to write like export const. So I'm going to create after that, like we have to define action type, and then what we have to do, we have to define the reducer. Okay, we have to define a reducer, like we have to like write the logic, like how should behave this code or block of code. So right now let's just export, I'm going to make a action creator called export const decrement decrement and counter action. Okay, so we also passing as a payload something. If you want to pass or not want to pass, you can also like, if I don't want to pass, okay, don't pass the payload. Okay, we just, okay, we just return an object. Okay, we are returning an object which has a type called decrement counter. If the type is decrement counter, okay, then what does we do? So what we happen, we keep called action creator or decrement counter action, and it goes to the reducer. Okay, so now what we have to do, we have to write a logic case. If it's called a decrement count, if that is a decrement counter, then what we have to do, we have to write a return. And what does I do? Count is equal to state dot count plus, no, I have to minus which one. So what does it do? It will minus the my count. Okay, now we have created a action decrement counter, and it goes on this decrement counter. And what does it do? State.count minus 1. If I go on the app.tsx, and if I call this action, which is called decrement counter action, let's copy, and I dispatch an action called decrement counter. Oh my bad. Decrement, de, oh my bad. Decrement counter action. Okay, so what does we do? So on the handle click of decrement counter, we are calling this function. And what does it like? What does this function do? We start dispatching an action called called decrement counter action. Okay, whenever we dispatch, it goes on the reducer. Okay, so it takes which reducer takes what, uh, which has a state called initial state, and an action which has a like, action has a type and the payload if there is. And we are, what do we doing, we are checking state.count. Okay, we are taking state.count and minus 1. If I click on state dot minus 1, so you can see it's minusing, it's decrementing the value. So this is how we have learned, this is how we have learned and learn the async operation operation in Redux. So hype, like this is hard to digest in like in 1 hour, but yeah, really it's like if you like, if you get understanding of it, like it's become much more easier. But first time it's become like it's feel like so hard for me. It's also but yeah, that's all about the counter app. But this is like we have learned how we do now. We have learned with the synchronous operation, but but how we are going to do, how we are going to deal with the how we are going to deal with the deal with the async operation, deal with async operation. So any idea? So we have to to handle to make API call with Redux. There's a call Redux thunk. Redux thunk is just a middle fare. So we have to install a Redux thunk. Redux thunk. Okay. So I install a Redux thunk. So we have to enhance this in the reducer. We had already tells that another argument takes in stored enhancer. So I use uh, apply middleware. I think my spelling is wrong or right. I don't know. Let's apply middleware. Yeah, I imported apply middleware. And what does apply middleware takes? It takes on a thunk. Okay, I pass a thunk. So I just import thunk from Redux thunk. I think it's correct. Yeah. What is doing? Apply middleware is not a function. Oh my bad. What? Oh, my bad. Apply middleware has did you mean apply middleware? Yeah. So apply middleware. So I imported apply middleware from the Redux, which this is the which enhance the thunk, and we have to pass to to work with the asynchronous operation. We have to pass a thunk. Okay. Now let's get with the thunk. So what does we want? I want there will be a product state. Suppose a product page. So on the Redux, I create a folder called product. Okay. So first of all, what does we do? We define a action types. Okay. So I'm going to define on the product. I'm going to define a action types dot ts to export const. Okay. So what does I do? A product page getting loading. Okay. So what does it do? Oh my bad. So export const product page loading. Okay. And another thing is called export. I can called multiple export uh, product page success. They will first one is loading, another one will be success, and the last one will be error. Okay. And I copy this one, product page fetch success, paste it, error copy, and I copy the error and fix the error. So we have created a three action type. Now it's time to create a call action.ts. Okay, we have created a call action.ts. On the action.ts, we have to import that our action. Okay, action types. So I'm going to import like this product page uh, loading and success. Okay, I just hold down 1 second class action types. Okay, now I also type product page error, product page loading. So we have also we have imported the three action types. Now I create export const product. We are get all product. We are doing get all product action. We create a get all product action, and it takes a payload and return. What does it return? An object. So what does we do? We import called a product. We pass a type called product fetch success. Okay, and we also pass a payload. Okay, we also pass a payload. Okay, so now let's make a API call. So what does how we do it with the thunk. So we are going to create a thunk called expose. Okay, before creating a thunk, we have to also deal with the success, error, and failure. So we create a called success, error, and so on. So how we are going to create